Thank you for watching our video. Please subscribe to watch our next video. Thank you for watching our video. Please subscribe to watch our next video.
Thank you so much for watching. Subscribe to Black Jewelries and join us for more powerful.
Get away from that board. You think you're qualified to even look at it. Dr. Margaret Voss said it the way she said things, Mostigs, loud enough for the back row to hear and sharp enough that nobody in between would forget it. Grabbed Elijah Carter by the sleeve of his gray uniform, pulled him back 2 full steps, her heel striking the hardwood like a gavel. It was not supposed to be real. His hands were still damp from the mop bucket in the hall. 200 students turned in their seats at once, the way a flock when a hawk crosses the field, and somewhere in the 3rd row a phone was already recording. Elijah didn't pull his arm away. He looked at the board instead, at the 5 lines of chalk he had written himself 2 weeks earlier, and he said nothing. Margaret smiled, the kind of smile that dares a room to breathe wrong. "You know what?" she said, turning to face the students behind her. "We'll solve this, and I will marry you." The room came apart. Somebody in the back stood up, laughing so hard he had to grab the seat in front of him. It was not supposed to be real. A girl near the aisle covered her mouth with both hands. Elijah set his mop against the wall, walked past Margaret close enough that she had to step back, and picked up a piece of chalk that had been sitting untouched in the tray since 7s that morning. It was not supposed to be real. Not the students, filming, Flesh wife, the clowns. The teaching his people assistants leaning against the back wall with their arms crossed was that this was the first time Officer Elijah Carter had held that chalk, who had been solving equations on that same board almost every night for 11 years. It was tonight for the first time. He was not going to erase what he wrote. Kingsley University sat on 60 acres of clipped lawns and old brick in New Haven. Etiquette, the kind of purpose had where they had been trained to grow in straight lines. The math department was ranked 80th in the country. 3M was a place where a family name could open a door that faster the Shanakans trip ever would. Elijah Carter had been mopping its marble hallways since he was 29 years old. Clocked in at 9:15 every night and clocked out at 5 in the morning. Hesiam, Teron gray, uniform, same cart with a wheel that squeaks on the left side. No matter how much oil the maintenance office sent up, he emptied the waste baskets in the faculty lounge. He scrubbed coffee rings off desks that tenured professors left behind, without a second thought. Nobody learned his name in 11 years. Nobody needed to. To them, he was a that moved through rooms after the lights went off and vanished in it again before anyone arrived. It was Elijah had a secret, and it was not the kind that hurt him. Every night, once the last window in the math building went dark, he stood in front of the whiteboard in Lecture Hall A and solved whatever the professors had left, chalked up from that afternoon. It was started 12 years ago, back when his wife Naomi was still alive. Naomi Carter taught algebra and pre-calculus at a public school to towns over. The kind of teacher who stayed 40 minutes late for the kid nobody else believed in. Was taught Elijah his first real proof on a paper napkin during their second date at a diner on Route 34 that closed down years ago. Finished it before their coffee arrived. She looked at him for a long moment and said, "You see numbers the way musicians hear a chord change." Never forgot that sentence. He built the rest of his life around it. Naomi died 5 years ago. Ovarian cancer, diagnosed in March, gone by October. She left behind an 8-year-old Mamiah and a worn leather notebook filled her handwriting, her key-hours and crossed-out terms, and one unfinished problem scrawled across the last page. Elijah never stopped solving after she was gone. It was the only way he knew to keep her voice in the room. He solved, he erased, he mopped, and every morning the board was clean, the way it had been clean for 11 years, until Dr. was not supposed to be real. Margaret Voss arrived from Princeton the previous September and started asking questions the rest of the department had learned not to ask. It was not supposed to be real. She was 33 years old, tenured on 29, published on three major journals before she turned 30, and named the Internet Janitor in Kingsley's 140-year history. Wore fitted blazers and heels that clicked on marble like a metronome. Blonde hair, pinned so precisely it looked engineered. Was eyes. This did the kind of math that measured people and rarely came up short of an answer she already expected. Was not supposed to be real. The daughter grew up a federal judge and a corporate litigator, private schools and summer intensives at MIT, a childhood where intelligence had a zip code attached to it. In her first faculty meeting at Kingsley, she stood up with a glass sparkling in her hand and announced an research $50,000 grant to whoever could crack a stubborn problem in algebraic topology that had outlasted 3 decades of attempts. Will separate the serious minds from the tourists, she said. I expect submissions from doctoral candidates only. Was not supposed to be real. For 3 weeks, graduate students filled whiteboards across 2 floors of the building, and nobody made a dent in it. Was not supposed to be real. Then one Tuesday morning at 7:40, Margaret walked into lecture hall A, found 5 lines of unraveling on the board and a approach none of her students had tried, incomplete but pointed in a direction that they were halfway through her coffee. Pulled the security footage that afternoon. The timestamp read 2:14 a.m. A man in a gray uniform, mop propped against the wall, standing at the board for 43 minutes. Writing, pausing, writing again. It was not supposed to be real. She printed a still frame from the footage, walked it down to the faculty lounge, and dropped it on the table in front of 3 colleagues eating lunch. We have a janitor, she said, who apparently thinks he's a mathematician. 2 of them laughed. It was not supposed to professor, the French named Thomas Whitfield, 66 years old, and 3 semesters from Rice, picked up the rent, studied it without a word, and set it back down. It was not supposed to be real. That afternoon, Margaret made a decision that would define the rest of her year, though she didn't know it yet. It was not supposed to be real. She would bring the janitor into her own lecture hall, in front of 200 students, and she would make an example of him. Not to test him. To remind everyone in the room exactly where he was supposed to sit. Well, email went out the next morning at 8:47. Mandatory attendance, 10 o'clock, department chair. Voss will address a matter of academic integrity. It was not supposed to be real. Nobody in the building knew what it meant. But when Margaret Voss called a mandatory session, you showed up whether you wanted to or not. It was not supposed to be real. By 9:55, every one of the 200 seats was full. Students lined at the side aisles. 3 teaching assistants stationed at the back with their arms folded. The board still carried Elijah's 5 unfinished lines from 3 weeks earlier. Margaret had never let anyone erase it. It was not supposed to be opened, and Allah walked with his cart, expecting a maintenance request, not an audience. He did not know 200 people were waiting for him. Everyone, Margaret said, this is Elijah Carter. He mops this floor, he empties your trash, and apparently, in his spare time, he also does our homework. It was not supposed to be real. That was when the laughter started. And that was when she yanked him toward the board and told 200 students to watch a man who cleaned toilets get humbled in real time. Mr. Carter, she said, with what exactly? A GED and a mop and a dream. It was not supposed. Elijah nodded once. He didn't answer her question about qualifications because there was no answer that would land the way she wanted it to. His jaw was tight. His knuckles had gone pale around the mop handle. Then Margaret uncapped a marker, wrote a longer, denser equation directly beneath his unfinished lines, turned around, and delivered the sentence that would end up on 40 million screens by the following week. Was solve this and I'll marry you. Elijah set the book down. He walked past her, close enough that she stepped back without meaning to, picked up the chalk and began to write. His first line was clean. No hesitation. The way a man walks through his own house in the dark. It was not supposed to be real. The second line mirrored her framework exactly. The same substitution the graduate students had already copied into their notebooks without question. It was then on the third line he stopped. circled a term in her own published work, and drew a line straight through it. "What are you doing?" Margaret said, tapping the board.
"You assumed continuity across this boundary."
"But the function has a removable discontinuity right here. Everything built after this point rests on an assumption that isn't true. That," Margaret said, her voice tightening, "is a standard transformation. It was in every textbook." "It is," Elijah said, "and it works when the boundary conditions are symmetric. Yours aren't. You changed the domain in step 2 and kept the original boundary anyway. It was not supposed to be real." A graduate student named Adam Price flipped back through 2 weeks of his own notes, traced his finger down a page, and said it out loud before he could stop himself. He's right. The words moved through the room, like a crack spreading across glass. 2 students checked. 1-5. Then, the entire front row was comparing pages, and nobody was laughing anymore. It was not stood frozen for 11 seconds. We're all dying to stand frozen in front of 200 people, who are all staring at the same whiteboard. "It was left that error intentionally," she finally said. "It was a test to see if any of you would catch it. It was not supposed to be rare. You could see it in the way Adam Price closed his notebook without looking up, in the way one of the teaching assistants shook his head, almost too small to notice." When a voice came from the last row. "Dr. Voss," said Thomas Whitfield, standing slowly. "It was not for the record. For last spring. I flagged this same disc in my notes, and assumed you'd catch it before it went to print." Paused just long enough for the silence to mean something. "You didn't." Margaret's face went the color of chalk dust. Not embarrassment. Something closer to fury. Elijah picked him up and walked out the door behind the sign by the Ramos and Hobbes stands. Ease, first time in 11 years, weren't shaking. Margaret did not sleep that night. She sat alone in her third-floor office directly above the lecture hall, replaying the circled error. Adam's whispers, Phil's calm voice from the back row, over and over until the details blurred into a single humiliation with no edges. It was not supposed to be real. By morning, Ethan had already posted about it online with no name attached. Just a caption that read, "Our department chair got corrected by the janitor," and told everyone it was on purpose. It was not supposed to be real.
It had 4,000 shares.
Margaret deleted every matched cam and called a meeting with Dean Raymond Cole at 2 o'clock that afternoon. It was not supposed to be real. "I want to formalize the challenge," she told. "Give him 2 weeks. He proves he can solve the full problem in front of the faculty comment, or he's terminated for unauthorized use of department property." Will studied her for a long moment. "He corrected a substitution error, Margaret. That isn't a crime. He accessed restricted materials. He misrepresented his qualifications on university property." 2 weeks, Cole finally said. "If he solves it, the grant is his, same terms as anyone else. And Margaret, this stays academic. No theatrics." She agreed to his terms out loud. She had no intention of keeping that promise, though nobody in the room could have known it yet. His letter showed up in Elijah's locker the next morning. University letterhead, 2 paragraphs. The word invited doing more work than a word in the letter had a right to do. 14 days to present a complete solution to the faculty committee. $50,000 if it was verified. His job under review if he failed or declined line out. He read it twice, folded it into a back talk, and went home to taunt it. His titter, a wheat, chant beneath, and long to vision, long with a pencil that needed sharpening. It was not supposed to be real. "Daddy, what's that?" Maya asked. 8 years old with her mother's stubborn chin and her mother's Oyev. She was free for a real answer. It was hard math problem, he told her. "Harder than mom's problems?" "Maybe," he said. And for 1 second, he almost smiled. Mom's always said hard problems. "Just mean you need more paper," Maya told him, and went back to her worksheet without looking up. He wasn't doing it for the $50,000. And he wasn't doing it to prove Margaret Voss wrong in front of a lecture hall full of strangers. He was doing it because the problem printed on that letterhead, he sat down at South Station work feed, was Semt honest. Last page. Naomi's leather notebook. Was not supposed found at. He had found it a library book years ago and copied it out. The way some people copy a poem they can't stop thinking about. Was been working on it when she got sick. She never got to finish it. Would. The campus paper ran the story on its front page 2 days later, under the headline, Department Par challenges janitor to solve employee problem. Next, to a grainy employee badge photo beside Mark's polished faculty port. Was comment section filled within hours. A betting pool appeared on a student forum, with odds set at 15 to 1 against him. Was not the pool. Nobody running that pool knew that the equation Margaret had chosen belonged to an unsolvable, combinatorial topology called the Harrow-Bennett conjecture, a problem that had defeated every mathematician who'd taken a serious run at it for 31 years. Margaret had picked it precisely because she was certain no one, especially not a night janitor, could touch it. It was night. Opened Naomi's notebook to the last page and started exactly where she stopped. Was not supposed to be real. By day 3, he had worked through the first 3 steps using structures he already half remembered from years of solving a Jeetnut on Princeton alone at 2 in the morning. Wrote on the backs of loose printer paper pulled from the recycling bin at work. Both sides. Every margin filled. Was not supposed to be real. By midnight, there were 40 pages stacked in the kitchen table, and Maya had fallen asleep on the couch with her workbook still open on her chest. Will carried her to bed and came back to the table. Step 4 was where Naomi had stopped, and it was where everyone else had stopped, too. Required a bridge between topology and number theory, mathematics that rarely spoke to each other in any published attempt, and every published attempt tried to force that bridge through brute computation. Elijah tried the same thing for 6 straight hours, filled 20 more pages, hit the split the phone by a moment, hit, and threw the crumpled sheet funnel after 2 in the morning. It was not supposed to be real. On day 5, Thomas Whitfield found him sitting on an overturned bucket in the supply closet, writing on the flattened sideboard box during his 15-minute break. "We're working on it," Whitfield said. It wasn't a question. Elijah looked up. "Shouldn't you stay away from me?" Was not say you're helping. "I'm not here to help," Whitfield said. "I'm here to tell you something. 22 years ago I attempted this same conjecture myself. 14 months. I published a partial result that got cited 11 times and never solved the thing. Was failed at step 4. Same place everybody fails. The topology to number theory bridge. Was tried every known method." He nodded toward the cardboard box in Elijah's lap. "But I never came at it from combinatorics." Reached into his jacket, pulled out a photocopy of a 1998 paper, cited exactly twice in 3 decades, and set it on the shelf beside the bleach bottles. "Won't solve step 4, he said. "But it might show you the door." Then he walked out without waiting for a thank you. Elijah read that paper 7 times over the next 3 days. The result inside it was narrow, almost trivial, almost standing alone in but met something in it Neil Treeby Jenning approach, a small llama, about boundary tensions in discrete spaces. Wasn't the answer. It was a key that didn't quite fit the lock yet, and for 4 straight hours. On day 8, he sat at the kitchen table, circling Undidos, trying to pin it into place while it kept sliding out from under him. Was not supposed teen that morning. Maya padded into the kitchen and chirped jamsness and found her father still at the table. "Was Daddy, did you sleep?" she asked. "Not yet, baby." She picked up one of the loose sheets, turned it sideways, and studied an integral sign like it was a drawing. "This one looks like a butterfly," she said. He laughed. The first real laugh in 8 days. "Mom used to say the same thing," he told her. She called them butterflies, too. "Was gonna finish Mom's problem?" Maya asked. "I'm trying. She would want you to."
Maya said in the flat, certain voice of a child, "Sienna has decided something and doesn't plan to revisit it."
And went to go get cereal, like the conversation was already over. Margaret was not idle during any of this. She had a colleague in the registrar's office quietly pull Blood's personal falsel, and what came back stopped her for exactly a moment longer than she expected. A school diploma, no college, hired at 29. One emergency contact, Naomi Carter, deceased. One dependent, Maya Carter, age 8.
Something crossed her face reading it, something that
Might have been doubt, or might have been the beginning of the guilt, and then she closed the file and opened an email instead. With subject line, concerns regarding academic integrity, Carter challenge. By day 11, Elijah's body was failing him. It was hours to cross 3 nights. His hands trembled, trounced 3 on the pencil and a mop bucket, and second floor home the good tots a Paul hop, this to pop and sprouts breakfast pile. For almost half a minute for a security guard, he was all right, why? And it was not supposed to be real. That night, he fell asleep at the kitchen table, with his face against a page of half-finished proof. And in the morning, they covered his shoulders with a blanket, made herself cereal without waking him, and left a note by his hand in purple crayon. You can do it, Daddy. Love, Maya. 2 days before the deadline, the walls of the supply closet were covered floor to ceiling in taped-up equations. And step 4 had gone from a solid wall to a door cracked open, though not enough yet to walk through. Elijah could feel the answer somewhere in Naomi's handwriting. He just hadn't found exact line yet, and the clock kept moving whether he found it or not. Margaret sent her email at 6:09 a.m. the following morning to the entire faculty committee, the dean, and the head of campus security. Subject line: urgent evidence of academic fraud. Inside were 3 attachments. A security still of Thomas Whitfield entering the supply closet on day 5. It was not supposed to be real. A photograph of the 1998 research article. Whitfield tugged behind a bottle, then bold felt like a bottle floor cleaner. Elijah's locker during what she called a routine safety inspection. Was side-by-side comparison. Notations circled in red, matching Elijah's cardboard box scrawl against a section of Whitfield's own partial result from 22 years earlier. Her email ran 4 sentences. Professor Whitfield has been feeding restricted research materials to an unqualified employee. Recommend immediate suspension of both the parties pending investigation. By 10:30 that morning, 2 Sakatakis arrived at the closet. At the client, Tiltypton told Elijah to step out, photographed every tape page on every wall, and sealed the door with yellow tape. 12 days of work, 40 sheets extending Naomi's approach. Now old labeled as an aisle phone that wasn't his anymore. Noon, Whitfield was called into the dean's office and walked out 15 minutes later suspended, without pay, then effective immediately. Whitfield found Elijah on a bench outside the Medeth building afterward. Neither man spoke for a while. "Oh, I'm sorry," Elijah finally said. "Don't be," Whitfield told him. "She's scared. That's what this is." It was picked a problem no one could solve. And went it, and that terrifies her worse than any circled error ever could. He stood up, buttoned his jacket. "You have 1 day left. No closet, no archive, no help from anybody. We'll have something none of us ever had."
"What's that?"
"Her notebook," Whitfield said, and walked away across the quad without looking back. It was local news picked up the story that same evening on headline: University janitor accused of fraud running his old employee badge vetoed, and a quote from an unnamed faculty source claiming he had no business being near that board in the first place. It was not supposed to be real. By morning it was everywhere, and the narrative had already been decided for him before he ever opened his mouth to defend himself. It was not supposed to be real. At 3:15 that afternoon, Maya came home from school, dropped her backpack on the floor without saying hello, and stood in the middle of the kitchen with her eyes red and her lip trembling. It was Bobby showed everyone an article on his mom's phone at lunch, she said, in front of everybody. He said you stole somebody's homework. He said janitors don't know math. I told him you do. I told him Mom taught you, and he said Mom probably didn't know anything either. Elijah didn't move for 10 seconds. Then he pulled her into his chest and held her until she stopped shaking, made her scrambled eggs and toast for dinner, which had been Naomi's own recipe for bad days, and put her to bed early without being asked. Alone at the table afterward, He opened the notebook one more time to the last page. Naomi saw final note sat in the margin the way it always had. Almost there. Try flipping the boundary. Mirror image. He had read that line 100 times without understanding it. This time it landed differently. It was not supposed to be real. She hadn't been talking about the boundary conditions of the equation at all. She'd been talking about the direction of the entire proof. It was not supposed to be real. Every mathematician who had ever attempted this, including Whitfield, had tried building the bridge from topology toward number theory, left to right, but that was the convention everyone had been trained into. Naomi was suggesting the opposite. Build it backward, right to left. Let number theory carry the weight instead. It was so simple it had been invisible for 31 years. Elijah picked up his pencil at 11:40 that night. It started with a basic number theory identity. Any second-year student would recognize Janitor, then mapped it onto the topological framework without seeing anything, letting these wash richer with cells off the water scarce finds its own level. It was step 4, the step that had stopped every mathematician for 3 decades, unfolded across 11 clean lines. Set the pencil down at 2:47 in the morning, read it through twice. And it held. It was not supposed to be real. I found it, he whispered to the empty kitchen. I bowed down your butterfly. The lecture hall was full by 8:30. The next morning, students packed into the aisles. 2 local news crews setting up cameras at the back. A reporter from the regional paper in the 3rd row with a notepad open. It was not supposed to be real. Someone was live streaming from a phone. The counter already climbing past 1,000 viewers before Elijah ever walked through the door. His faculty committee sat in the front row, in stiff posture with folders open. Dean Cole sat at the end with his reading glasses halfway down his nose. Margaret sat dead center, blazer pressed, not a hair out of place, turning a pen over and over in her lap. Whitfield was not in the front row this time. He sat in the last seat of the last row, arms folded, watching. Was not supposed to. Door opened. Elijah walked in, wearing the Chiangri uniform he had worn every night for 11 years, carrying nothing but a folded sheet of paper tucked into his breast pocket. The room went silent the way a room goes silent when 200 people realized the same thing at the exact same instant. He walked to the board, picked up the chalk, and began. The first 3 steps seemed familiar. The framework Naomi had started years earlier, now fully extended. When Price leaned forward with his notebook open, tracking every line, Dr. Ellen Marsh, a topologist with 3 years on the committee, uncrossed her arms halfway through stress grid. She got up mapping, naturally, instead of forced. It was not supposed to be real. 4. And stopped for 3 seconds, long enough for the whole room to hold its breath with him. It was not supposed to be real. He pulled the folded paper from his pocket, looked at it once. Naomi's and in the small smiley face she'd drawn beside her own breakthrough, and put it back without needing it. He already knew. He wrote the number theory identity. He generalized it, and then he built the bridge from the other direction, right to left, exactly the way his wife had scrawled mom 5 years before she ever knew it would matter to anyone but her. 11 lines, each one tighter than the last, each inevitable, once you saw it. Was nobody in that room breathed, until he set the chalk down, and it rang against the aluminum tray. Dr. Marsh spoke first, barely above a whisper. It holds, she said. Every line it holds. When Cole took his glasses off and rubbed his eyes. Mr. Carter, he said, where did you study? Nowhere, sir, Elijah told him. My wife taught me. Adam Price started clapping first, slow and deliberate, and then the whole room was on its feet, phones raised, the live stream counter climbing past 50,000 while it happened. Margaret Voss did not stand. Her pen had fallen to the floor, and she made no move to pick it up. She wasn't looking at a Hunter anymore. She wasn't looking at a janitor anymore. And was looking 11 poems of Pliny, Imana, lan halt them the dead wife's open arm and inner veins had finally cracked open. The story didn't end there. The story didn't end there, though the equation was solved. Within a week, a formal review board had been convened of his aid to Margaret's daughter, and the investigation turned up more than anyone on the committee expected. It was not supposed to be real. Once word spread that Elijah's case had reached at the board, 3 people who had never met him came forward on their own, because his story had cracked something open in them too. A former adjunct named Rosa Delgado wrote a letter describing how Margaret had blocked her contract renewal months earlier. Rowan questioned association of Margaret's papers, the same kind of high tea Elijah had caught on a cup on a wallboard. He was not supposed to be real. A transfer student named David Okafor testified that he had told him in Starn and Kimonsel that his teeth scalbock meant he'd need to work twice as hard just to keep up. A comment logged in 3 separate student complaints that had gone nowhere. A campus groundskeeper named Frank Molina publicly accused of theft after Margaret misplaced a laptop in her own, an accusation only after the laptop turned up under her desk 2 days later, with no apology ever issued. The board confirmed Elijah's proof was entirely his own work with Indine Ice, verified by 2 outside Elijah's mathematicians den et need you into Lynch tensification and reached the same conclusion. Dr. was not supposed to be at all. A phone call came through to Dean Cole's office confirming the grant. A formal card followed by university mail. 2 days later, $50,000. Elijah Carter's name printed on it in plain black ink. No asterisks and no conditions. Margaret's case went the other direction entirely.
The board found Warren's accusation against Whitfield baseless and Swilmanches and employment a Elijah's challenge.
In the board's own words, a pattern consistent with prior conduct tough complaints spanning 3 years. Was not supposed to be real. She resigned as department chair the following week. Submitted to Berthold Paid. Swatted page letter to the dean and cleared her office by 4 o'clock that same afternoon. Was kept exactly one thing from that office. The printed still frame from the security footage at the board at 2:14 in the morning. Pinned it above her desk at home, not as a trophy, but as something closer to a reminder of the version of herself she didn't want to be again. Whitfield was reinstated with full back pay and a formal written apology from the university within the month. 3 weeks after the presentation, a letter arrived from FIT, a full doctoral fellowship in mathematics, tuition, and housing and stipends in full one of the selection, elegant, calling as proof. Over a decade. Weren't inviting him as a curiosity. They were inviting him as a colleague. Daddy, what's that? Maya asked over cereal. School wants me to come study math, he told her. Is it far? A little. Will I come? She asked, already halfway out of her chair. You're coming, he said, and this time he let himself smile all the way. It was not Drobe's apartment. 2 days after Neptumet sat in her car outside for 11 minutes before she found the nerve to knock. Was said it as an insult. She told him when he opened the door, Maya, standing behind him, a crayon still in her hand. I wanted to humiliate you. I wanted to prove you didn't belong in my world. Voice held steady even though her hands didn't. But you do belong. You always did, and I was too arrogant to see it until you made me. Elijah didn't say anything right away. He looked at her a long moment, the way he looked at an equation. He trusted himself to write the first line. And then he stepped aside and held the door open anyway. A year later, the math department at Kingsley launched a Dean Emmy Carter name, Naomi's part, offering tutoring and application support to who never got told they belonged in a room like that one. Owen Price runs it now on Tuesday afternoons. Thomas Whitfield teaches a seminar on unsolved conjectures every spring. And he opens the first class every single year the same way, with the story of a night janitor and a cardboard box. Elijah still keeps the mop from his old job, the one with the squeaky left wheel, propped in a closet in his apartment near MIT. It was not out of nostalgia. Out of respect for the 11 years it took him to get where he was always supposed to be. When somebody ever tells you that you don't belong in the room, Stay anyway. Solve it, and let them watch you do it. It was not supposed to be real. If this story moved you, tell us in the comments what your unsolvable problem is, the one you're still working on at your own kitchen table. It was not supposed to be real. Share it with somebody who needs to hear that dignity isn't handed out by anyone else's permission. And subscribe, because stories like this one deserve to be told all the way to the end. Disclaimer. This story is a work of fiction created for entertainment and educational purposes only. All characters, names, businesses, and events depicted are entirely fictional and do not represent any real person, living or dead, or any actual establishment. Whose resemblance to real persons, organizations, or events is purely coincidental. This content is intended to explore themes of human dignity, workplace ethics, and social justice through narrative storytelling. It does not make factual claims about any individual, company, or institution.